Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're going to be tackling cybersecurity.
Ooh, fun.
Yeah, and we're going to be using this CompTIA Security Plus Study Guide that you provided.
Yeah, it's a good one.
It's pretty
Needs
dense.
a lot of info.
Yeah, so we're gonna try to extract like the most useful and intriguing bits to give everyone listening a solid grasp of this whole like landscape.
Absolutely. Yeah, think of this as building a layered security approach, you know?
Okay,
Yeah.
I like that.
We'll start with kind of the foundational concepts and we'll work our way up to the more advanced strategies.
Okay, so the book is written by Ian Neal with contributions from Sahil Parekh and Amir Shataya.
Mm-hmm.
And it's designed to prep you for the CompTIA Security plus SY0-701 exam.
Hmm.
But like beyond just passing a test, what are some of the key takeaways someone should have after going through this material?
Well, one of the most fascinating things that this book dives into is how cybersecurity goes beyond just protecting data.
Okay,
It's also about building trust and accountability in digital systems.
that's an interesting angle. Could you give me an example of what that looks like in practice?
Absolutely. Take non-repudiation, for instance. The book talks about how using digital signatures and audit trails ensures actions can be traced back to their origin.
Oh, so you can't just like deny you did something online because there's a digital trail?
Exactly. This is crucial in things like financial transactions or legal proceedings. It's about creating a system where actions have consequences and people are held accountable for their digital activities.
That makes a lot of sense. It's like the digital version of you break it, you buy it.
Right. And the book goes on to explain how these principles are implemented through various security controls.
Okay, let's talk about those controls. The book mentions technical controls, managerial controls, and operational controls.
Mhm.
What's the difference and how do they all fit together?
It's all about having a layered approach. You've got your technical controls like firewalls and encryption, which are your frontline defenses.
Right.
Managerial controls like risk assessments and security policies set the framework for how things should operate. And then you have your operational controls like background checks for new hires or security awareness training for employees.
So it's not just enough to have the strong technology. You also need the right policies and procedures in place. And everyone needs to be on board with security best practices.
Exactly. The book does a good job of highlighting the human element of cybersecurity and the importance of having well-defined processes.
I was particularly intrigued by the section on access control and network segmentation.
Mhm.
Sounds a bit like a digital version of those spy movies where they have to go through like multiple layers of security to reach their target.
Well, in a way, it is. Access control is all about managing who gets access to what information and resources.
Okay.
It starts with identification, like usernames or biometrics to prove who you are.
Right.
Then there's authentication, which is typically a password or PIN to confirm you are who you say you are.
So it's not just about knowing your name, it's about proving you have the right to be there.
Right. And the final step is authorization, which determines what you're allowed to do once you're in the system. Not everyone needs access to everything. So it's about granting appropriate permissions based on roles and responsibilities.
Okay, that makes sense. But why is network segmentation so important? It sounds like you're just chopping up the network into smaller pieces.
It's more strategic than that. Think of it this way. If there's a security breach in one part of the network, segmentation can prevent the attacker from gaining access to the entire system.
So it's like containing a fire. You're preventing it from spreading and causing widespread damage.
Exactly. Segmentation is a critical part of a layered security approach. It helps limit the blast radius of an attack and buys you valuable time to respond.
Okay, so we've talked about controls and access, but what about protecting the data itself? That's where encryption comes in, right?
Absolutely. The book dives deep into various encryption methods, and it can get pretty technical.
I bet.
But one thing that really stood out to me was the discussion of tokenization and data masking as alternative ways to protect sensitive data.
I'm curious about that. How are those different from traditional encryption?
Well, encryption scrambles the data, making it unreadable without the decryption. Key tokenization, on the other hand, replaces sensitive data with a non-sensitive equivalent, a token.
So it's like using a substitute that doesn't have any real value if it's stolen.
Exactly. Think of it like using a gift card instead of your actual credit card number for an online purchase. Even if the retailer is breached, your actual card information isn't compromised.
That's a great analogy.
Right.
What about data masking? How does that work?
Data masking is about disguising sensitive information while preserving its format and usefulness for things like testing or analytics. It's like redacting sensitive parts of a document, but in a way that still allows you to see the overall structure and context.
Interesting. So you're protecting the sensitive bits while still being able to use the data for other purposes.
Precisely. Now, moving beyond traditional methods, the book also touches on blockchain technology and its applications beyond just cryptocurrency.
Everyone's talking about blockchain these days, but I'm still a bit fuzzy on how it actually works and what makes it so secure.
At its core, blockchain is a decentralized and distributed ledger. That means the data is not stored in one central location, but is replicated across multiple computers.
Okay, so instead of having one vulnerable point, the information is spread out, making it harder to tamper with.
Exactly, and each block of data is linked to the previous block using cryptographic hashes, creating a chain of information that's virtually tamper-proof.
So if someone tries to change something in one block, it would disrupt the entire chain, making the change obvious.
Precisely, this makes blockchain incredibly secure and transparent. The book gives a great example of how this could be used for recording property transactions. Imagine being able to trace the entire ownership history of a house, knowing for sure who owned it and when, with no possibility of fraud or tampering.
Wow, that would be a game changer for real estate.
Yeah.
It eliminates the need for a lot of trust and paperwork because the record is publicly verifiable.
Exactly, and that's just one example. Blockchain has the potential to revolutionize how we think about data security and trust in many different industries.
Okay, so we've covered some key concepts
Yeah.
like non-repudiation security controls, access management encryption, and even blockchain. It's clear that a lot goes into building a secure digital environment.
It does, and we're just getting started. This book also takes a deep dive into the various threat actors out there. It's like a who's who of the cyber criminal underworld.
Okay, bring on the rogues gallery. I'm curious to learn more about the different types of threats we're facing in the digital world. Let's dive into that in part 2 of our deep dive. Welcome back to the deep dive. Last time we were discussing some of the foundational concepts of cybersecurity and how things like encryption and blockchain are changing the game. But now I think it's time to get a little more hands-on.
Absolutely. This book provides some really practical guidance on how to actually build a secure system, starting with mitigating those enterprise-level threats. It's not just about theory, it's about putting those concepts into action.
Okay, so let's talk strategy. What are some of the key takeaways when it comes to actually mitigating threats?
Well, one of the first things the book emphasizes is the importance of understanding your attack surface. It's like a battlefield, and you need to know where the enemy is most likely to strike.
So it's about identifying those weak points before the attackers do.
Exactly. The book breaks down different types of attack surfaces, like file-based attacks, where malicious files exploit vulnerabilities in your software. You also have voice call attacks, like caller ID spoofing and vishing, where attackers use the phone system to trick people into giving up sensitive information.
And then there's the ever-popular phishing attacks where they try to trick you into clicking on malicious links or downloading infected attachments.
Right, and the book highlights how even seemingly simple coding errors can have catastrophic consequences. It uses the example of the slammer worm, which exploited a buffer overflow vulnerability and spread rapidly across the internet, causing major disruptions.
Yeah, that's a little scary to think about. So how do we actually protect ourselves against these kinds of threats?
The book delves into a variety of mitigation techniques, and one of the most important is, you guessed it, segmentation.
Okay, segmentation again. I'm sensing a theme here.
There's a reason it keeps coming up. It's a fundamental part of a secure architecture. The book goes on to stress the importance of access control, ensuring that only authorized users have access to sensitive data and resources.
And we talked about that earlier, right? It's about those layers of identification, authentication, and authorization.
Exactly. The book also gets into configuration enforcement, which is all about establishing and maintaining secure configurations across your entire infrastructure. It's like having a set of security blueprints that everyone has to follow.
So you're not just leaving it up to chance or individual discretion.
Right, standardization is key. The book recommends using industry benchmarks like the CIS benchmarks to establish a consistent set of security configurations. It's like having a recipe for security that everyone follows.
Okay, so we've got segmentation, access control, and configuration enforcement. What else? The book also mentions disabling unused ports and protocols. Why is that so important?
Think of it like locking the doors you don't use. It reduces your attack surface. It makes it harder for attackers to find a way. In the book actually provides a helpful table of potentially risky protocols that should be restricted.
It's all about minimizing those entry points, right?
Precisely. And then there's endpoint detection and response, or EDR, which is a more advanced security measure.
Okay, tell me more about EDR. I've heard the term, but I'm not entirely sure how it works.
Imagine having a security guard on every device constantly monitoring for suspicious activity. That's essentially what EDR does.
Yeah.
It uses advanced techniques like AI and machine learning to detect and respond to threats in real time.
So it's not just about prevention, it's also about early detection and rapid response.
Exactly. EDR solutions can isolate infected devices, block malicious traffic, and even roll back systems to a previous state if necessary.
Wow, that sounds incredibly powerful. It's like having a cybersecurity SWAT team on standby.
That's a great analogy. It's about having that extra layer of protection to deal with those threats that inevitably slip through the cracks.
Speaking of slipping through the cracks, let's shift gears and talk about vulnerabilities. No system is perfect, right? So how do we manage those inevitable weaknesses?
That's where vulnerability management comes, and the book dedicates a whole section to this process, highlighting its importance in maintaining a strong security posture. It's not just a one-time thing, it's an ongoing cycle of identifying, assessing, and mitigating vulnerabilities.
Okay, break that down for me. How does that cycle actually work in practice?
Well, the first step is conducting vulnerability scans. The book talks about tools like Nessus, which can scan your entire network for potential weaknesses in operating systems, applications, and even network devices.
So it's like having a security expert do a thorough inspection of your entire system.
That's a good way to put it. And what's interesting is that Nessus can perform both credentialed and non-credentialed scans.
Hold on, what's the difference there?
A credentialed scan is like having an all-access pass. You provide Nessus with valid login credentials so it can see things from an insider's perspective. This allows it to find vulnerabilities that might be hidden from a non-credentialed scan, which is more like a thief casing the joint from the outside.
So it's about getting a more complete picture of your vulnerabilities, both from the inside and the outside.
Exactly. Now, once you've identified those vulnerabilities, you need to assess them. The book mentions the Common Vulnerability Scoring System, or CVSS, which provides a standardized way to rank vulnerabilities based on their severity.
So you're basically figuring out which ones are the most critical and need to be addressed first.
Right. And then comes remediation, which is all about actually fixing those vulnerabilities. This can involve patching software, updating configurations, or implementing compensating controls.
So it's not just about finding the problems, it's about taking action to solve them.
Exactly. And the book stresses the importance of continuous monitoring to ensure that those vulnerabilities stay fixed.
Okay, so vulnerability management sounds like a pretty intense process. It's like a never-ending battle to keep your systems secure.
It is, but it's an essential part of a comprehensive security strategy. And speaking of battles, let's talk about what happens when, despite our best efforts, we still find ourselves under attack. That's where incident response comes in, right?
I was hoping we'd get to that. The response always sounds a bit like a thriller movie where everyone's scrambling to contain the damage. Is that a fair assessment?
Well, there's definitely a sense of urgency when you're dealing with a security incident, but it's more about having a calm and methodical plan in place rather than just scrambling.
So you're saying it's not just about reacting, it's about being prepared.
Absolutely. The book lays out a six-step process that starts with preparation. You need to have the right tools, policies, and procedures in place before an incident occurs.
Okay, so preparation is key.
Yeah.
What are the other steps?
Well, after preparation, you need to be able to identify that an incident has actually occurred. This involves monitoring your systems for suspicious activity, analyzing logs, and correlating events to determine if there's a real threat.
So it's about recognizing those warning signs.
Exactly. Then comes containment, which is all about stopping the bleeding, isolating the affected systems to prevent further damage or spread. This could involve disconnecting from the network, shutting down services, or even taking entire servers offline.
So like a digital quarantine.
Exactly. Once you've contained the threat, it's time for eradication. This is where you remove the malicious software, clean up infected systems, and restore data from backups.
Okay, so you're essentially disinfecting the system, getting rid of the infection.
Precisely. And once the system is clean, you move on to recovery, getting those systems back online and restoring normal operations as quickly as possible. This involves testing and validating systems to make sure everything is functioning correctly.
So you're bringing the system back to life, making sure it's healthy and functioning properly.
Exactly. And the final stage is, perhaps most importantly, lessons learned. This is where you analyze what happened, identify what went well and what could be improved, and update your incident response plan accordingly.
It's about turning that experience into knowledge that makes you more resilient in the future.
Precisely. Incident response is not a one-time event. It's a continuous cycle of preparation, identification, containment, eradication, recovery, and lessons learned.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground here. Mitigation techniques, vulnerability management, and incident response. It's clear that cybersecurity is not just about technology. It's about having a holistic approach that involves people, processes, and technology all working together.
You got it. And while those are some of the key practical takeaways from this book, there's still one more crucial aspect we need to delve into: the constantly changing landscape of vulnerabilities and how to stay ahead of the curve.
That sounds like a great topic for the final part of our deep dive. Let's wrap things up here and continue this discussion in part 3. Welcome back to the deep dive. We've covered a ton of ground in this cybersecurity deep dive, from building a secure infrastructure to actually responding to those incidents when things go wrong.
Yeah, for sure.
But as we wrap things up, I want to talk about something that keeps coming up in this CompTIA Security Plus study guide.
Okay.
And it's the fact that this whole cybersecurity landscape, it's constantly changing.
It is. It's such a dynamic field.
Right.
I mean, there are new threats emerging all the time.
Yeah. So how do we keep up?
Yeah.
How do we make sure our knowledge and our skills stay relevant in this ever-evolving world?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
It is.
The book really emphasizes continuous learning and adaptation as key to staying ahead of the curve
Yeah.
in cybersecurity.
Okay.
And it's not just about keeping up with the latest technology. It's also about evolving your mindset.
Okay. I'm intrigued. What does evolving your mindset actually look like in cybersecurity?
Well, it starts with recognizing that security is not a destination, it's a journey.
Okay.
There's no such thing as a perfectly secure system.
Right.
There will always be vulnerabilities, and there will always be people trying to exploit them.
So it's not about achieving some kind of impenetrable fortress.
No.
It's about being able to adapt and respond effectively to whatever comes your way.
Exactly. It's about developing that security-conscious mindset, always thinking about potential risks and how to mitigate them. It's also about being proactive, not just reacting to threats after they've occurred.
That makes sense. So practically speaking,
Yeah.
what are some things that someone listening can do to stay ahead of the curve?
The book highlights the importance of staying informed about emerging threats and vulnerabilities.
Okay.
This could involve subscribing to security newsletters, attending industry conferences, or participating in online forums and communities.
So it's about tapping into that collective knowledge and sharing information with other security professionals.
Absolutely. It's also about investing in ongoing training and certifications to keep your skills sharp and up to date.
Yeah.
The cybersecurity field is constantly evolving, so you need to be constantly learning and adapting.
And I imagine those certifications can be a really valuable way to demonstrate your expertise to potential employers.
Absolutely. Certifications like the CompTIA Security Plus show that you have a solid understanding of the fundamental concepts and best practices in cybersecurity. It's a great way to boost your credibility and marketability in this field.
Okay, so staying informed, ongoing training certifications, those are all great proactive steps. But what about when things do go wrong?
Yeah.
What advice does the book offer for responding to those unexpected incidents?
Well, as we discussed earlier, having a solid incident response plan is crucial, but the book goes a step further and emphasizes the importance of playbooks.
Oh, okay.
Detailed step-by-step guides for responding to specific types of incidents.
So it's not just about having a general plan, it's about breaking it down into those specific scenarios.
Right. The book provides some fascinating examples of how this might play out in real life.
Okay.
For instance, imagine a security team suspects an insider threat. An employee who might be stealing data or sabotaging systems. The playbook might outline how to discreetly monitor that employee's activities, perhaps, by limiting their mailbox functionality or restricting their access to certain files.
So it's about having a plan for those more nuanced situations.
Yeah.
Not just the obvious cyber attacks.
Exactly. Playbooks allow you to respond quickly and effectively, minimizing the damage and containing the threat.
It's almost like having a set of pre-rehearsed responses for different security emergencies.
That's a good way to think about it, and the book stresses the importance of regularly testing and refining those playbooks to make sure they stay relevant and effective.
So it's a continuous improvement process, just like everything else in cybersecurity.
Precisely, and that's why this deep dive has been so valuable. We've explored the key concepts, the potential threats, the mitigation strategies, and the importance of continuous learning and adaptation.
We've unpacked a lot of information for this CompTIA Security Plus study guide. And while we've only scratched the surface of this vast field, I feel like I have a much better understanding of this whole cybersecurity landscape.
And hopefully you feel empowered to continue your exploration,
I do.
to delve deeper into those areas that spark your curiosity, and to embrace the challenges and opportunities of this ever-evolving world.
Absolutely. This deep dive has definitely been an eye-opener, reminding me that cybersecurity is not just about the technology. It's about a way of thinking, a mindset that prioritizes security in every aspect of our digital lives.
Well said. And with that, I think we can safely conclude our deep dive into the world of cybersecurity.
Awesome. Thanks for joining us on this journey. And remember, in the world of cybersecurity, knowledge is power and continuous learning is your strongest defense.
Until next time.
This is the Deep Dive signing off.